I hope so, too. Thank you, former Defense Secretary William Cohen. We appreciate it. All right, now to Afghanistan and the 2014 exit date. That war is now in its 10th year with the human and physical costs mounting every single day. Republican Congressman Mike Coffman is from Colorado. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee and is a former Marine. And yesterday he returned from a trip to Afghanistan. Congressman, great to have you here. I know you were in Afghanistan a year ago as well. Did you see a difference?
Well, I saw a difference, I think, on the ground. I think we're making some progress militarily. But unfortunately, I think that the Afghan governance piece that has to follow on once we've secured an area, it just ain't in there yet. And I think that part is problematic. And we probably need to look at some kind of course correction, I think, in terms of the policy.
Now, I know you're against nation building. Are we doing nation building in Afghanistan?
We are absolutely doing nation building. It's a robust counterinsurgency whose cornerstone is really nation building, and I think I think that's a bridge too far. I think it's unsustainable for our military and for the taxpayers of this country.
So that's interesting. Then do you want to leave before the 2014 exit date?
No, first of all, I think the president is right about the 2014 date. I don't see that as an exit strategy at all. That is a date merely by which there's a benchmark where Afghan security forces are to take the lead in military operations. What I think is, I do think we need a presence in Afghanistan that meets our security interests. I don't think that reshaping Afghan society, developing their economy, and giving them a Western-style form of government that doesn't fit their political culture is in our best interest. And quite frankly, I don't think that it's achievable and necessarily in their interest.
So, Congressman Coffman, I'm trying to understand what you think the proper aim should be, because that's an interesting question. So if you were in charge, what would you want to do in the next 4 years, and would that be worth it for 4 years to do what? I'm trying to get that.
Well, I think we have an interest, security interest in Afghanistan, that it not fall to Taliban control. I think we have great interest in Pakistan right now, particularly in the ungovernable areas. And our presence in Afghanistan gives us a platform where we can certainly strike at those terrorist threats, those al-Qaeda threats in Pakistan as they coalesce. So I think we certainly have a role to play in Afghanistan. I think the problem with this administration is they have adopted the plan from the last administration that is basically a nation-building plan that requires us again to create a Western-style form of government in Afghanistan, reshape their society, and develop their economy. And I think we can achieve our security objectives in Afghanistan without doing all those things. And I think it's unrealistic, the current plan. So I think there's a path in the middle. We can do counterinsurgency where there's relative security and counterterrorism where there's not.
Yeah, we're in half agreement there. I don't think we can build up the nation of Afghanistan. I agree with you there. On the other hand, I think, that we're fighting the Taliban and the Taliban's fighting us because we're there. They've 92% in Kandahar and Helmand, when in a poll, when asked why are the Americans here, had no idea. They hadn't even heard of 9/11. So it seems to me that we should get out earlier. But I want to go to another topic. You had written a letter to Defense Secretary Robert Gates about the Fort Hood shooting, and you said that one of the problems is the ideology of radical Islam. Tell us real quick about that, what your thoughts on that were.
Well, I think during the Cold War, we recognized an ideological threat of Marxist communism, and we in fact vetted those serving in the military to make sure they didn't have sympathies to that ideology. I believe, are facing today the threat of radical Islam, and it's an ideology, I think, fraudulently camouflaged in a religion. I served in Iraq with the United States Marine Corps, and I served with Muslim Americans that distinguished themselves really as patriotic Americans in their service to our country. And I would think that they would want to make sure that they were vetted as well, to where the soldiers around them had confidence in them, that they were not sympathetic to the tenets of radical Islam.
But Congressman, I mean, when you say to somebody, hey, I want to vet you because of your religion, Can you see how that might cause problems? For example, Scott Roeder killed Dr. George Tiller. He was an extremist radical Christian. Eric Rudolph did the Olympic bombing and a series of other bombings. He was a radical Christian. If somebody came to you and said, Congressman Coffman, I got to vet you because you're a Christian, I want to make sure you're not radical, wouldn't you be bothered by that?
Well, I think everybody going into the military is vetted to make sure they're not a threat to their fellow soldiers. And I think is it a form of profiling to say that American Muslims that might be in fact eventually encouraged into radical Islam. Let me tell you what the danger is. What I worry about for the Muslim Americans serving in the military, that by trying to be so politically correct where they are not vetted, I think that the fact that there are suspicions on them by their fellow soldiers, airmen, sailors, and Marines, and I think that those suspicions further alienate them and make them more susceptible to some of the tenets of radical Islam. So well, I think it's better and healthier for our military altogether.
Congressman Coffman, I got to press you on this just a little bit here, because then you're singling out the Muslims, though. Doesn't that create a problem? So you say, hey, look, everyone's vetted, but I want to vet the Muslims that are going into the military more. I mean, if somebody came to you and said, look, I'm not going to vet the Muslims, I'm not going to vet the Jews or Buddhists, whoever, but since you're a Christian, I'm going to vet you more because of Tiller, because of Rudolph, because of all the other people who've done terrorist acts. Again, wouldn't that be problematic and possibly a constitutional problem?
I think we have to, well, the mission of the military is defend democracy. I don't know if it's to practice it. But I do think that we have a responsibility to at least recognize, this administration has to recognize that we are at war with an ideology, and that is radical Islam. And I think that this administration refuses to recognize that threat. And I think that that is part of the political correctness of the Fort Hood report. And I think the question is that the military needs to be asking itself is how many more soldiers are going to be, lives are going to be sacrificed at the altar of political correctness before we come to the grips with the fact that we are at war with radical Islam. And just as during the Cold War we had to vet people to make sure that they didn't have sympathies with Marxist communism, we have to vet people today to make sure that they don't have sympathies with the tenets of radical Islam when they're a threat to their fellow soldiers.
Unfortunately, we've got to leave on a note of disagreement again, because I'm afraid that you go to Muslims and you say, I'm going to vet all of you, then you conflate Muslims with radical Islam, and that I think is the problem. But I understand what you're saying, and we want to thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back. This is MSNBC.